I do feel like there is a lot within our NHS guidance that is outdated evidence now. When you go and see your midwife for the first time, she'll say, oh, have you been taking anything like Pregnacare, so on. That is not what I recommend, and I will very happily bash Pregnacare to the moon and back.
Ice baths and sauna, they're two of the things that are very much on trend, but like I've never seen anyone talk about how they might impact both fertility and then pregnancy.
This is a great question. So obviously the recommendation is it actually feels great to run on stress hormones. But what you're ultimately doing is driving a car with no fuel in the tank. And at some point, it might not start to feel as good.
One piece of health propaganda you're not falling for.
I'm not adverse to having soup for breakfast. I'm not adverse to having like bolognese or something like that.
Bolognese for breakfast.
Yeah.
My kids will literally say you're living the dream. Grace, name one piece of health propaganda you're not falling for.
Huel.
Coffee pod machines, a handy convenience or source of hidden mould in your kitchen.
Oh, you know my answer. Source of hidden mould.
Okay. Okay. Is it okay to go surfing after an embryo transfer?
Yeah.
This is going back to your post a few weeks ago, right?
Yes, within reason.
Okay, cool. We'll come back to all of these things. What's the worst thing someone can do for their fertility?
Eat ultra-processed food every day.
Okay. And give me one piece of overhyped pregnancy advice.
Oh, that you need to eat for two.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Grace, welcome to the podcast. So today we have Grace Kingswell, nutritional therapist, specialising in fertility and gut health. You also cover pregnancy, postpartum and early childhood nutrition. You recently underwent IVF and support other couples through the same process. And you're known for your no-nonsense take on wellness myths. So I'm sure we'll dive into a few of those. And now, Grace, you're pregnant yourself. So huge congratulations.
Thanks, Alex.
3 months pregnant, is it?
Yeah, just starting my foray into the second trimester. So starting to feel a little bit more human, which is really nice.
Good. Now, I remember when, through Kirsty's pregnancies, the first 3 months were really tough. I seem to remember, that's physically quite tough. And then the second trimester, I feel like you start feeling yourself again. And then the final trimester, you just start feeling really heavy and uncomfortable. And you're kind of over it by that point.
This is my second pregnancy and it's been very different to my first. They say that it's like metabolically and kind of from a cardiovascular point of view, it's like running 2.2 marathons a day for every day of your pregnancy, which is mad to just think how I mean, I've not fact checked this.
Oh my God.
I've seen this around.
Yeah.
This has been a really different pregnancy, a very different start to the pregnancy for sure. The first time round I'd just had an IVF cycle and I went straight into a fresh transfer. So I was feeling all sorts of gross from all of the meds and things like that. This time round had what's called a natural transfer, which is unmedicated, just an embryo from the freezer, but actually have found, maybe it's because I'm doing it this time round with a toddler, which is so much harder, isn't it? But I have found the actual being pregnant itself so far a lot harder. Lots more nausea, lots more fatigue. It's just a wild ride, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why you're on. Like, I'd love to hear all about the things that you did during, IVF and also to support fertility and what you recommend to others to support fertility, but also like how you've adapted your days, your diet, your nutrition, etc. through pregnancy now. But okay, so it was one particular quote that I'm going to read. I'm going to start with a quote that I loved of yours. Breakfast doesn't always have to look like breakfast, which I love that quote. But what are the key things that you recommend aiming for at breakfast to support fertility?
Yeah, I think it's hard, isn't it? Because we are sold this lie ultimately by marketing companies that breakfast foods are cereal and grain based, usually relatively sweet. And really it's just another meal and it's a really important one. You've been fasting overnight you've been asleep for hopefully 8 hours. Maybe you had your dinner 2-3 hours before you went to bed. That's quite a long time without food. You wake up in the morning, you get that cortisol awakening response, which is, fundamental for kind of kickstarting your metabolism for the day. You've gone outside, you've got some daylight. Your body is really primed to receive a decent meal at that time. Where we've gone kind of wrong in the West is that our biggest meal tends to be in the evening. And now with the season that we're in, it's also dark outside and we're eating our biggest meal under conditions of artificial light when technically we should be in biological darkness, and that has implications for our digestion. So I really like breakfast to be a meal that contains protein, fat, fiber, colorful vegetables, good complex carbohydrates in the same way that maybe your evening meal would be. So whether it's like leftovers from the night before, or whether it's something savory like eggs, veg, some ferments, some good quality sausages, like a slice of sourdough, rather than just carbohydrate on its own, basically, that's going to set you up for a really great day.
And are you doing that 3 meals a day?
Yeah. I mean, so my breakfast usually I do have, so I had this whole thing on Instagram. It's quite funny, really. I had this hashtag called eggs and veg, and it really took off. And it was about inspiring people to have a protein-based savory breakfast and reap the benefits, because very, very quickly you realize, oh, my mood is more balanced. My energy is more stable throughout the day. Like my hormones seem to be a bit more online. And it's a really quick win for so many people. Hilariously, it transpires that I'm actually intolerant to eggs. So I haven't eaten an egg. I haven't eaten an egg in about a year, but let me just caveat that with they are a fantastic food and especially important for fertility because of their high choline levels.
Okay.
But so for me at the moment, I typically have like a yogurt bowl that I stir through some very high quality, unadulterated whey protein into, and then I'm using that as an opportunity to get really good fiber in. So I'm having things like flax and chia and seeds, and then some seasonal fruit. And that's been okay throughout pregnancy so far. I've actually craved a lot of fruit. I think your body wants like quick energy sources. But I'm not adverse to having soup for breakfast. I'm not adverse to having like bolognese or something like that.
Bolognese for breakfast.
Yeah, just whatever's
My
going to
kids
give
will literally
you.
say you're living the dream.
Why not? Like you need, like it's very important to get protein in at breakfast. And you're not really going to get that from a piece of toast or from like a pastry and a coffee,
So these sound like, good breakfast recommendations for everybody. Like, and you mentioned that choline is especially beneficial for fertility. Is there any adaptations to this breakfast you'd recommend, or is it just this is the breakfast? Works for fertility, works for everybody, works for pregnancy?
Well, it does. So if we're talking about eggs, I mean, it works for everyone so long as you don't have an allergy or an intolerance. Eggs are one of the major allergens. So, lots of people do struggle with them.
Wow.
But they're fantastic. Yeah, so choline is really important for building the baby's brain health. And there was a very interesting study that came out recently where, and I'm not saying that like our child's IQ matters greatly in the grand scheme of things. What matters is that they're healthy and happy and fulfilled.
Yeah.
But there was a study that came out recently where mothers who supplemented with, and it was pretty high doses, I can't remember off the top of my head, high levels of choline in pregnancy, their children had higher IQ scores, like when they were a few years old or later in life.
Okay.
Because it's just very crucial for brain health.
Yeah.
And the only other like fantastic source of it in the diet is something like liver. And, most people are not really wanting to eat offal. So eggs are a really good food. So that.
I used to remember when I was a kid, we used to have, my parents used to give us liver once a week. And like literally me and my brother hated it. But throughout most of our childhood years, we'd have liver and chips once a week. Fried liver.
That's great, isn't it?
So
I mean, we've just deviated. Yeah, we've deviated so much from that. I mean, it is quite hard, especially like beef liver. It's not that palatable to just sit down and have a plate of. But I usually buy mince that is 70% beef and 30% beef liver. And then when you're making a sauce with that, you really aren't tasting it at all. But the nutrition content is so much better. And for my son, who's 3, if I'm making him a smoothie, I will open up a freeze-dried beef liver capsule, or at least like 3 or 4 of those, and put that in his smoothie. Again, he can't taste it, but it's helping with his iron levels and loads of other bits and bobs.
Wow. Okay. Cool. So like what are the kind of what is the general recommendation what for breakfast and nutrition for people who are pregnant, and is there anything there that you think is missing, or you think, is the incorrect advice?
So let's just first of all say that the first trimester is just a survival game. All bets are off. And one thing that I like to tell my pregnant clients with regards to what they feel like they might be able to eat in the first trimester versus what they actually do eat is that to begin with in a pregnancy, before the placenta is established, the developing embryo is nourished from the blood supply to the endometrium, so that the lining of the womb. And that those blood levels of nutrients are determined by, what you did and what you ate before you conceived. So even if you can only stomach chips for a few weeks in that first trimester or longer, don't panic, because the developing baby is still getting the nutrition that it needs if you prepared, if you had a good, nice, healthy diet before you got pregnant. Once you feel like you can start to eat normal food again, then it's really important to think about blood glucose regulation. In pregnancy, we are much more, we can become much more insulin resistant. Our blood glucose regulation is more like that actually of a type 2 diabetic in pregnancy than it is a regular person.
Wow.
So maintaining steady blood glucose is really important. And that means eating a balanced meal. And a balanced meal is one that has all of the macronutrients together. So protein, fat, and carbohydrate, rather than just straight carbohydrate. So that could be something as simple as, if you're going to have a piece of toast, have it with nut butter rather than jam, so that you've got some fat and a little bit of protein to help balance out the carbohydrate.
Yeah.
What advice do I see that do I think is kind of maybe not relevant in pregnancy? Well, that's a big question. And, I'm not one to shy away from these topics. I do feel like there is a lot within our NHS guidance that is outdated evidence now. With, for example, you are actually far more likely to get listeria from unwashed salad leaves than you are from an unpasteurized cheese, for example. I think there is so much fearmongering that happens towards pregnant women, like, your immune system is not functioning at all when you're pregnant. You need to be so careful. Don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat that. And actually what we see is that, women are so worried about eating an egg yolk that's runny that actually they decide just to not eat eggs. And then they're missing that pretty much, if they're prenatal, their supplement that they're on, it doesn't have good choline levels. Where's that coming from in the diet, So there is a fantastic book that I recommend to everyone called Real Food for Pregnancy by Lily Nichols, and she kind of goes through the latest evidence, because it takes so long for evidence in the medical literature to make it into our mainstream public health discourse. We're talking like 18 to 20 years.
I mean, there's one thing that's recommended that, I hate to admit as the owner of a coffee company, but the NHS recommends that people who are pregnant are okay to drink, to have 200 milligrams of caffeine a day. So that's the NHS guidelines on caffeine. But there's actually the research, there's an umbrella review published 4 years ago in the British Medical Journal, which concluded that absolutely no level of caffeine is safe during pregnancy. So, I mean, and that's coming from someone who owns a coffee company, but if the science is pretty conclusive there. So it's crazy that 4 years later, the NHS is still given these guidelines, and it's not it wasn't just a single study. That was a whole review.
So, I mean, I'm not sure if we've got time for me to check. Like, I have this fantastic resource right here, and I don't want to say I don't believe that, but from what I know, I would be happy for a pregnant client of mine to have one coffee a day. I don't know. I mean,
I'm still
having one cup of tea.
Yeah.
Like, I can't not have a
That's
cup
what
of tea
I
in the
always
morning.
said, and that's what I always said, and that's what Kirsty, if the NHS recommend it, but it's just, speaking to, Alex Manos, who's our chief wellness officer here, it was him who highlighted the study to me, and it's just, it was pretty conclusive. So, but, that's coffee. So what about actually, so maybe while we're on coffee, What about coffee during fertility? What's your view on that? Because I definitely haven't read anything anti that, or it doesn't seem as clear cut anyway.
No. And I think it probably always comes down to personal tolerance. If you're someone that has a coffee and you notice that you get jittery and anxious,
Yep.
it's maybe, genetically you do not detoxify caffeine as well as others, or you detoxify it a lot slower, or perhaps you're missing some of the cofactors in your diet that help that process and that breakdown. And I would be mindful of that in fertility. I think, excess caffeine, we do know that it can drive cortisol. And obviously a woman's body wants to feel very stable and unstressed in order to conceive. It wants to feel safe. And high levels of cortisol can impact our ovulation and so on. So yeah, being mindful about things like that. But then I also think, we're like, as you say, the NHS still say that it's all right to have the odd glass of wine when you're pregnant. And I really don't think that is the case at all. So, there are lots of things that we probably do that aren't necessarily conducive to fertility. Like I would also argue that, HIIT classes and Barry's boot camp aren't great for a woman's body if she wants to get pregnant that month.
Right.
And that we need to be, looking at gentler forms of exercise that don't drive our stress hormones super high. So yeah, I think it does always come down to...
Is that the cortisol? Is that the cortisol as well? Why you'd recommend avoiding the kind of HIIT class, the kind of high intensity exercise?
Yeah, it's that kind of feeling of like fight, flight, freeze, that's really not where we want to be in terms of your nervous system response. But like I just think, it's always very nuanced and it's always very dependent on the person, and we can't really make like blanket statements for everyone because some people conceive very easily and some people don't. I see the people that don't conceive easily, and so I am thinking about all of these ideas maybe on the periphery that might just help. So yeah, I think it always depends.
Yeah, definitely. I think also it depends. I think listen to your body and how you react. Like if you're someone who drinks a cup of coffee and feels anxious and jittery, then you probably are someone who has a big cortisol reaction to drinking coffee. But if you're someone like me and I drink coffee and I could have 3 or 4 cups of it in fairly rapid succession and not notice a thing. So I think most habituated coffee drinkers probably have 0 cortisol impact. So it's very different. Listen to your body. Just go with the feeling, how it feels for you.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely can increase your tolerance to caffeine if you do it over a period of time. But yeah, I mean, I've really gone off coffee in pregnancy, and I did the last time as well. And I hear that from a lot of like pregnant friends. I don't know if it's like because it's the taste is so strong, or like the smell. Like if Nick, my husband, was to have a takeaway coffee in the car, I'd be like, oh my God, no, like this is awful, get it away. I mean, I had one this morning, but it's funny, what you kind of decide you want and don't want during this time.
Totally. Okay, cool. So on the breakfast theme, so big breakfast. What about fasting and that kind of thing? Do you recommend in general fasting, intermittent fasting, or even longer fasts? Like what's your stance on that?
As always, it depends. Depends on the person. I think my general take is that I'm much more happy for men to fast than I am for women, although I do think there are certain life stages where fasting for women can become really transformational. I don't think that during our fertile years it is necessarily particularly helpful. The body is going to experience that lack of food as a stress. And obviously we need to be like very replete nutritionally to conceive and to have a pregnancy. But I think that if you are really into fasting, I mean, one thing I hear from people who fast is like, oh, I just feel so good in the morning and like my brain's working really well. But then as soon as I have that first meal, I'm really sluggish again. And, so I just don't eat till lunchtime. And it's like, well, do you know what? It actually feels great to run on stress hormones. But what you're ultimately doing is driving a car with no fuel in the tank. And at some point, it might not start to feel as good. At the moment, again, coming back to this idea of our light environment being absolutely fundamental for our health, if people fast and enjoy fasting and it works for them, I much rather that they skip the evening meal than breakfast. It's less socially acceptable because, as I said, we tend to have that evening meal with friends or our families, our partners. But in terms of your physiology, once the sun has gone down, we don't really want to be taking in food and digesting food. So having a really good breakfast and a really good lunch, and then either fasting in the evening or just having a very light evening meal is definitely the way to go in terms of what works better for your physiology. There are instances where I would consider doing it myself. For example, if I was on a long haul flight and I was moving between multiple time zones, I might fast during that time. I think it can be quite helpful in the latter years of a woman's life when we actually need to be a lot more careful around, again, like blood glucose regulation, maybe eating as you're going through kind of perimenopause, menopause, eating it in a bit more of like a keto approach. I think fasting during that time, lots of women find really beneficial. But yeah, for my client population and where I'm at with things, I want 3 meals a day.
3 meals a day. Okay. Okay. No, 3 meals a day. Totally with you. One thing that I've actually found useful is making my breakfast a little bit later, but still like 8:30 in the morning. So I'll have I'll have quite a big breakfast with 3 eggs, sourdough, some salad, literally every day. But my evening meal, I eat quite early. So at like 6 o'clock. So I'm probably getting a near enough 14-hour fast overnight, but I'm still getting 3 solid meals during the day. Like, what about that kind of intermittent fasting? I guess it's quite on trend, but is that something worth aiming for?
Yeah, I think again, if that's feeling really good to you, that's absolutely fine. You're taking in enough calories in the daytime, you're getting those 3 meals, and actually, crucially, you're not eating too late into the evening, which at this current season, mid-November is really important. The earlier we can eat, the better.
And if someone actually is into like a habit of fasting, so because you meet some people who are staunchly for it, who it's very much part of their daily routine. If they fall pregnant, is it something that actively to be avoided? I'm guessing. I'm guessing. Although you said earlier that you shouldn't be eating for 2 because that's a nutrition myth.
Yeah. Well, it's a myth in the sense that your calorie needs actually only go up in the 3rd trimester by about 500 calories a day, which is like a decent snack, isn't it? It's more about the nutrient density of the food needs to go up rather than the actual quantity that you're eating. So I think, personally, I would. So I think lots of women involuntarily in the 1st trimester end up fasting because they actually just can't stomach any food. That was the case for me for a few weeks. I really barely ate at all. You just have to do what you've got to do. But generally speaking, hunger is rife. Like I don't think carrying out a fast would be easy at all, and I don't think it's advisable in pregnancy. It would not be my recommendation.
Okay, very good. Okay, and what about recommendations? So changing topics slightly to things like ice baths and sauna, like heat and cold exposure, because they're 2 other things that are
Yeah.
very much on trend. But no, I've never seen anyone talk about how they might impact both fertility and then pregnancy. Like, what are your view on
Yes,
those?
this is a great question. So obviously the recommendation is no saunas in pregnancy. I
Okay.
believe that's, NHS guidance.
Mm.
I actually had this question from a follower on Instagram the other day because I really enjoy an outside shower in the morning, which is cold. And they said,
Yep.
aren't you supposed to just keep everything really warm when you're pregnant? And in traditional Chinese medicine, that is the case. They want you to keep your feet warm, your womb warm, lots of nourishing warm foods, never drinking cold water, that sort of thing. And I think my response to this follower was, my core body temperature is not really changing that much when I have an outside shower because it's brief, let me tell you. I
Yeah.
am more doing that to get the benefits for my lymphatic system, which does really appreciate
Right.
some cold water. And for me, working on the lymph has been really transformational in terms of just the way I feel generally, supporting my body's own ability to detox. And I just love it. I don't think I would go and swim in the sea. I don't want to cool down my core temperature that much. But yeah, in terms of like legalities, the recommendation is no saunas when you're pregnant. But
no saunas. Okay. And then so your cold showers. So you do something else after the cold shower to improve that lymphatic.
yeah, I jump up and down 100 times.
100 times. Oh my God, that's a
Yeah.
lot.
My recommendation for clients is when you wake up in the morning, it's usually for women, it's just you wake up, you grab your boobs and you jump up and down 100 times. And you do it first thing when you wake up to shift the lymph, because the lymph system, which sits just beneath our skin, it's not like the cardiovascular system. It hasn't got a heart muscle to pump blood around.
Yep.
The lymph needs to be stimulated manually. So exercise, walking, anything that really works the calf muscles really helps to move lymph. So like rebounding is the wellness trend that is supportive of lymph health. That's why people have been buying these tiny trampolines, but you can actually just jump up and down on the spot. And I love it. I was first told to do it by a very close friend and practitioner, mentor, Robin Puglia. And I implemented it and I'm so obsessed. I think everyone should just wake up and jump up and down. I don't do it immediately when I wake up, but I like to do it in conjunction with my morning daylight exposure, which is another like absolutely non-negotiable for me.
Let's go there. So when you wake up, so what do your mornings look like? Like what time do you wake up? And then talk me through your morning routine.
I wake up at 5 a.m., not because I want to.
My God.
Ever since the clocks, did they go back recently or forwards?
Fall backwards.
Yes, ever since they went back, I've really struggled to readjust. And I think I was previously waking up at 6. I'm now waking up at 5. And that's just when I wake up. And it's horrific. I hate it because the sun didn't rise this morning until about 7:15. And what did I do for all of that time? Like just in the dark. It's so miserable. So I am very, very hot on light. And I'm very into quantum physics, which is this area of science. Some would say pseudoscience, but science where we are understanding like electromagnetic fields and their responses and impacts on the body and the impact of our light environment. Humans were never supposed to, we were always supposed to see the full spectrum of light. So when you go outside, you see the full spectrum. So you see the reds, the blues, the greens. Yes, there are times of day where, for example, the reds and purples are more prevalent, and that would be sunrise and sunset. And there are times of day where the blues and the greens are more prevalent, and that would be midday. However, since we've transitioned to LED bulbs, LEDs filter, they isolate, just like the blue and green wavelengths. So every time you're turning on an LED bulb in your house, it's above your head, you're communicating to your body that it's midday sunshine. And that's going to have impacts for your hormones, which work on circadian rhythms, your sleep-wake cycles. I mean, all of these internal cues, your mitochondrial function, the way your body produces energy, is all going to be very heavily impacted by that. So within our home, we have circadian lighting. So we have light bulbs where you turn it on in the daytime and it gives you that full spectrum daylight with quite a lot of blue. And then there's a setting for kind of dusk, which is much more amber. And then there's a nighttime setting where there is zero blue light whatsoever. So it's tough at the moment because it's so dark in the morning. But what I try and do is not see any LEDs, phone screens, or like blue-green wavelengths until I've been outdoors. So I have
even if it's dark.
Yeah. So
until you've been outdoors and seen the sunlight.
Yeah. So I have, for example, like I have a filter on my phone that goes red. So I've got that on. I've got like red light therapy lamp that I will use in the morning, and I've got like a no blue side light. So if I am pottering around in the kitchen making a cup of tea, I haven't got standard lighting on. Then as soon as it is light outside, I am out there. It was really hard when my son was little and I had to breastfeed him and I couldn't go outdoors straight away. But these days I'm outside straight away, and I'll either take the dog out or I'll have my my shower and my jumping session. And then I will eat at some point, but I won't eat until I've seen daylight, because I want that physiological signal. I want, going outside and getting that full spectrum light is what signals to your body to have that cortisol awakening response as well. And that sets off this amazing cascade of hormones. It dumps out melatonin, primes the body for daytime. And then I'm happy to take on food and know that my digestion is ready for that. And then, in the evening, once the sun's gone down, again, I'm not seeing any blue light at that stage. I'm wearing blue blocking glasses that have red lenses. If you're wearing ones that are clear, then you have been sold a lie, because if you can see the color blue through the glasses, they're not blocking out blue light. And again, using the lighting that we have in our home to make sure that my whole family is protected from these very damaging wavelengths.
I'm just going to interrupt today's podcast to say, if you're enjoying the conversation today, subscribe to our email newsletter. So we send out a weekly email sharing the breakdown of the latest podcast episode. That comes out every Tuesday. And then every Sunday, me and my wife and co-founder Kirsty send an email newsletter out. I think we're up to edition 200 now. We've been sending it out every week, every Sunday for the last 3 years. And we literally keep our finger on the health and wellness pulse. We share the latest research, the latest trends, hacks, science, and more. So head to exhalcoffee.com and subscribe to our email newsletter, or click the link in the show notes. Right, back to the show. Wow, okay. And then I also read something else that you do in the morning around oil pulling. Is that something that you recommended for pregnancy or fertility, was it?
No, it's for everything. And actually it's very important for fertility. Okay, so so the oral microbiome is amazing, and it's thankfully gaining so much more awareness now, as it should, because the mouth is the gateway to your body. It is connected to your whole microbiome system, your whole gastrointestinal tract. And what happens in the mouth does not stay in the mouth. The mouth is not Las Vegas. So if you have low-level inflammation in the mouth, such as gingivitis or gum disease, when you brush your teeth, do your gums bleed? Have you got bad breath? Do you have any coatings on your tongue? Have you had any dental work? And if so, was it done properly? Have you properly assessed for bacteria, etc.? If any of that is happening, then we can have bacterial translocation, but we can also have signals of inflammation being amplified around the rest of the body. We also know now that there are certain strains of bacteria that colonize the mouth, such as Fusobacterium nucleatum, which are associated with things like preterm pregnancy loss, premature rupturing of membranes, and also breast cancer. They can be transferred from the mother to the baby whilst the baby's in utero, and then transferred back from the baby who is breastfeeding on the mother's breast, and increasing risks of breast cancer. So there are some of these bacterial strains which we really do not want in our mouths, and they will maybe be there because of things like mouth breathing, airway misalignment, poor dietary choices, so regularly eating things that kind of coat the teeth and are quite hard to remove. So the classic one in America is goldfish crackers, or those like a Ritz cracker, where you eat it and it's kind of stuck in your teeth. So teeth brushing and oral health is I think it's amazing and fascinating. And I think, we don't give it enough press. It's so important. I ask all my clients about oral health and when was the last time they saw a hygienist. So really what you want to do, a few easy things that you can do, is move your brushing routine to first thing in the morning. So when you are asleep, your mouth produces less saliva. And saliva is what's really important for rebalancing the microbiome environment and the pH of the mouth. So that's why we wake up with morning breath, because we haven't really had that ability with the saliva overnight. So when you wake up in the morning, you want to be getting rid of that bacteria. So you tongue scrape first thing, and then you brush your teeth before you've eaten or drank anything, ideally. And bonus, you could do oil pulling. Oil pulling with coconut oil is amazing for your oral microbiome. And so moving that to before you've eaten or drank really can hugely impact your oral health for the better. So I do all that first thing.
Yeah, interesting. Because have a very kind of, strict morning routine, but one thing that I don't do is brush my teeth early. So I always wait till after I've had breakfast. So it might be like 9 o'clock before I actually brush my teeth, by which time we've been up for 3 hours. So maybe I'll
Well, I
switch it
brush
up
mine
and start
again. I
brushing.
usually brush mine again after breakfast. And like full disclosure for the listeners,
Okay.
I am tongue scraping first thing. Then I brush my teeth with just
Yeah.
water because I don't want my toothpaste to ruin the taste of my cup of tea. But I also know that my oral health is really good. So if it wasn't, maybe I would use toothpaste. But so I brush with water and then I have my breakfast. And after breakfast, I brush with toothpaste again.
Okay. And what about toothpaste? So
Yeah.
there's a recent trend of fluoride-free toothpaste. What do
Mm-hmm.
you use? Do you buy into that? We've started using fluoride-free toothpaste and have even bought some for our kids.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your
Nice.
thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, my thoughts are that fluoride is a neurotoxin, and can
Right.
interact with
Okay.
with the thyroid. However, I do take a balanced approach on this in the sense that if the oral health is really bad, and that person has active cavities and loads going on, use of a fluoride toothpaste might be warranted, whilst we are rebalancing and working on
Mm,
the oral health. So you probably are using one with hydroxyapatite in or nano hydroxyapatite.
yep.
This is a more natural version, and it has the same remineralizing effects as fluoride. So
Mm,
all of the benefits without the risks, basically. But all of the other stuff that you do around brushing your teeth will is almost, I mean, teeth brushing is fundamental, but is, I would say, as important. So making sure you're not mouth breathing is really important. Making sure that you are, flossing and tongue scraping and oil pulling if you want to. Brushing is essential because the mouth is the only part of our digestive tract that doesn't have microbial transfer on its own. So in the gut, we have peristalsis. We're constantly kind of moving things through. But in the mouth, we only actually have the manual act of brushing our teeth to break up bacterial biofilm on the teeth. And actually, you should be brushing your kids' teeth until they're at least 7 because they can't do it properly until then.
okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess I probably should add that we've switched, but we are using this nano hydroxy appetite one or whatever. I think there's lots of different fluoride-free toothpaste out there, but I don't think all of them are as good as each other. So I think there's some very different levels of quality. So, okay. So, let's switch to where should we go next? Supplements. So, in
Mm.
terms of supplements to support fertility, what kind of things are generally recommended? What did you take and what do you recommend?
I think the NHS recommends these days folic acid and vitamin D, and that's it.
Mm.
When you go and see your midwife for the first time, she'll say, "Oh, have you been taking anything like Pregnacare, so on?" That is not what I recommend, and I will very happily bash Pregnacare to the moon and back. So there
Right.
is there is a huge difference in between like the quality of prenatal and pregnancy supplements. Some of them have like incredibly low levels of nutrients that we actually need to be in much higher levels. Some of them use very poor forms of those nutrients. So, we can have things like, I'm sure you know this with something like magnesium, for example. There's lots of different types of magnesium that you can take. You can take a
Yeah.
biglycinate, you can take malate, for example. In cheap supplements, it's probably just magnesium oxide. So in terms of bioavailability, maybe not as good. So there are certain brands that I really like that I use with lots of my clients, but I'm usually trying to be quite personalized, based on their blood results or their genetic methylation panels. They may have a uniquely higher need for B6, and I might be putting more of that in, for example. Um, so you need a really good quality prenatal. You then probably need some omega-3, some fish oils. You might want to take a vaginal probiotic to improve the vaginal microbiome before delivery.
But what around lighting, around sleep? But I imagine sleeping is pretty difficult when you're pregnant. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But like, what kind of things are you doing? What do you recommend to help a good night's sleep?
I mean, at this point, I am lost for options because my sleep is so bad. So I put a reel up about this actually. When we were going through our embryo transfer journey, I was sharing it in real time because I just thought, why not? I mean, I think maybe some people thought I was crazy in case I got a negative pregnancy result and then had to tell the internet that. But I guess I just backed myself. But anyway, one of the things, so I said earlier that it was completely unmedicated, but they do still give you progesterone to take up until your transfer and then for a few weeks afterwards. Progesterone is progestation. It's the hormone that, helps the embryo stay on the inside. And so it mitigates, hopefully, against early pregnancy loss. So they give it to you when you're having an assisted cycle. I have never, ever slept as well as I slept when I was on progesterone, to the point where, like, can I not just take this every single day of my life? So for women, progesterone is our hormone of relaxation, of calm. It's like anti-anxiety, makes your brain feel like a really lovely place to be, and it really supports sleep. And it's one of the reasons why when we go through menopause, which is another like amazing thing that women have to go through, we really struggle with sleep because the levels of our estrogen and progesterone are rapidly declining. And it's why we get more overwhelmed and stressed and anxious. Anyway, so that was brilliant and I was sleeping like a baby. But since I stopped that, oh my God, it's been so hard. And I would say that I probably do everything right. I'm off my screens really early. I'm wearing my blue blocking glasses. I'm relaxing before bed. I'm taking, magnesium. I'm taking glycine, which is an amino acid that has been shown in studies to improve deep sleep cycles. It's all I can say is like it is slowly getting better as I've entered the second trimester, but it's just hard. It's just really hard. And then as you start to get bigger, you're really uncomfortable and you have to wee all the time. And I don't really know what to tell you.
I think sleep's so hard for anybody these days. We literally every morning we have I have a Garmin watch. I don't know if you're into sleep trackers and these kind of things, but I have a Garmin which I wear
got my Oura ring here.
You got your yeah, so I've got an Oura ring. So I actually bought this about 5 or 6 years ago, and wore it for a couple of years. And then when I launched the business, I was just so sick of the waking up every morning and checking the Oura ring, and it was just telling me that I was in a deep state of stress all night long. And I was like, I just don't want to know this. It was stressing me out to know how much stress I was under. So I just I haven't charged it in about 4 years now. But I do now have a Garmin watch which I wear for running, but it actually tells you a sleep score. So every morning we come downstairs and like everyone's like, so what was your HRV last night? What's your body battery? And literally, like, I feel like every day we're trying new things just to improve it and get to that holy grail of 100 body battery.
Yeah.
Few things we've tried recently, like reading before bed's been quite a good one, I think. And I think I did read somewhere that you only need to read for maybe like 8 minutes or something, like a really short amount of time before bed. And it's been shown that can have a big impact on sleep. I don't know if you've tried that. It's such a simple thing.
So I've always read, like I read before bed every night. That's when I read. But I've recently started reading romantasy novels, which I was speaking about this on my podcast with my podcast wife, Sophie, the other day. If you want to listen, it's called Two's Company. It's very funny. And I was saying that how I feel like every mother should read romantasy because it is that much of a release from your everyday life. You're just like, it's like Harry Potter, but for adults, just with like great sex scenes thrown in. But the plot lines can be incredibly gripping. It's like action packed. And sometimes when I'm reading that before bed, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm very awake. So the best thing for me, this is just going back like pre-pregnancy, because actually my HRV in pregnancy has been sky high, like way higher than my baseline. And I don't understand why. But pre-pregnancy, the best thing in terms of supporting my sleep quality and my HRV overnight, which I can explain what HRV is if people want to know, was using a Sensate device, which is a vagal stimulation device, like a little pebble that sits on your chest here where your vagus nerve runs down the front of your body. and it syncs to a nice audio track and it vibrates, and it kind of is communicating to your body that it's safe. It can slip into that kind of parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system. And that for me gives me the best results in terms of like sleep tracking and sleep scores, and also my general feeling of like how rested do I feel when I wake up the next day. But I actually bought my Oura ring when my son was about 9 months old, because he was still waking like 12 times a night. And I was like, this is so bad. But I was curious to see if it was as bad as I thought it was. And what I have overwhelmingly found since having the Oura ring, which by the way, I always wear on airplane mode, and I hope you're wearing your Garmin on airplane mode too, is that my sleep is never actually as bad as I thought it was. And that is quite reassuring, I think.
That's good. I feel like Kirsty, I did buy Kirsty a Garmin at one point a few years ago, and she used to find it really difficult because she'd check it throughout the day and it would say her stress levels were high during the day. And I did try and explain that, it's okay to have some level of stress during the day, because walking, it registered as stress. Exercise, it registered as stress. Like everything you do kind of registered as stress on her Garmin. So you have to take these things as a slight bit of a pinch of salt in context. Definitely in context. HRV is so maybe if you just briefly explain what HRV is, because I feel like that's one of the biggest things for me that I track. And my Garmin has a slightly different rating to other fitness trackers, and my like your Oura ring might have a different scoring system. But my HRV, when I'm during a normal week here, is in the 50s. On a good night's sleep, it's in the 60s. But every summer we go away for a month and we spend a month traveling with the family, and we might travel around Indonesia or Brazil or whatever. And during that month, my HRV is always at least in the 70s, maybe even creeping up to the 80s. And, we can have really intensely stressful, active, busy days on the streets of Indonesia. But my HRV at night is just like amazing. So yeah, maybe just explain for the listeners like what HRV is, because I think it is a real legit one.
Yeah, it is. It stands for heart rate variability, and it's measuring the actual time, the gap between each individual heartbeat, because your heartbeats aren't even, although they may sound it. And tracking HRV is a good way of assessing where your nervous system is sitting in terms of stress levels, fight or flight, how rested you are. And it's a very good metric to track over time. But what I would say is it's highly personal to the person. So you can track HRV on yourself over time, but don't compare it to someone else's HRV, because we are all very bio-individual, and there'll be unique factors that are affecting your HRV as opposed to someone else's. And actually your baseline might be lower than someone else's, but you're still in really good health and your stress levels are good, and someone else's might run into the hundreds, and that might be normal for them. But yeah, it's a really interesting data point, and mine usually is quite low, but I think that's maybe normal for me. But in pregnancy, it's been in the hundreds, and I'm like,
I can't
what
believe
is
it's
this
been
magic?
so much higher in pregnancy.
Yeah,
No,
I think
maybe it's
I'm
because
like,
you just feel maybe you feel a
I don't
deep sense
know.
of fulfillment because knowing that you're pregnant.
Actually, I've just been questioning my life choices this time round.
Okay, cool. We are running out of time, so let's move on to our closing questions. So we ask every guest 3 questions at the end. So let's go. So what's one habit that you're trying to stop?
I'm going to flip it slightly and say that I'm trying to stop not exercising enough. As in, I really want to exercise more, and I need to somehow
Yeah.
find the energy to do that. But that is a goal of mine, and specifically weight training.
So how important would you say, and this isn't one of the 3 questions, so how important would you say exercise and weight training are when you're pregnant?
Well, I was actually listening to a webinar this morning. I have not finished it yet on exercise and pregnancy, but it can really help with birth outcomes and your experience of labor. I think the key thing is to not start a new exercise routine that's maybe drastically different from what you were doing before. So, I do want to start lifting weights, but I'm not about to like go and lift really heavy weights in the gyms. My body's not really used to that. I haven't done it in a few years. But I'm definitely staying active in terms of stretching and walking and things like that. But weight training generally for women is essential because it's one of the most important things we can do to maintain bone density as we go through perimenopause and menopause. With our declining estrogen levels, we are very vulnerable to osteopenia and osteoporosis, but weight training can be hugely impactful for that. So that's why I kind of want to get into like a good routine of it at some point.
Yeah. Kirsty, interesting side story. Kirsty, throughout both of her pregnancies, so she always had a really bad back. So she used to go to this gym in London called the ICSI gym. I think it's actually closed down now, but it's massive in Germany and some parts of Europe, but ICSI gym. And she used to go there a couple of times a week, strength training, to try and kind of keep her back strong. And then was always really nervous about getting pregnant because she had a really bad back and was nervous of how she could, carry the baby and that much weight on the front of her with chronic back pain, which she had for years. But actually, she was really nervous about it going into pregnancy. But then actually, it's interesting because you don't suddenly have a 9-month-old baby strapped to your stomach and then have to carry it, which was how she thought about the situation in her head. You actually, the bump slowly builds and gets heavier and heavier and heavier over the 9 months. So actually, I think her back got stronger and stronger and stronger over the 9 months. So actually, her back was nowhere near as bad as she thought it was going to be through pregnancy.
That's
and
so
then
cool.
actually, she kept up. Yeah, and she kept, and so, reassuring for anyone out there who is hoping to get pregnant, who does have a bad back, because I imagine it's a lot of people. But she also kept going to the gym throughout pregnancy. And on the day that she went into labor, I'd gone to the gym that morning, and it really helped her through labor. She had water bursts and stuff. So it's just, I can't recommend it. Maybe it's not something to start if you're midway through pregnancy, but keeping it up as long as you can.
I'm just so tired.
Yeah, no, okay, cool. So the second one, what's the most overrated piece of health advice, do you think?
That veganism is good for you. There you go.
Okay, let's go on to the next one then. No, we don't. So what's one habit you think those listening should add into their daily life? So just give us one habit, because most of all this stuff will be totally new to our listeners. So just give me one hard-hitting habit.
That's very easy. I'm going to give you two because I could give you so many in this category. The first thing is you must go outside first thing in the morning when you wake up or as soon as it is light. Daylight exposure is absolute non-negotiable for your physiology. And the second thing, which is a bit more niche, is I would say turn your Wi-Fi off at nighttime.
Okay. In your whole house or just in your bedroom?
In your whole house, just turn the router off at nighttime.
Okay, amazing. Grace, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
I just wanted to say that if anything that I've said on this podcast has sparked further questions, that people can either come to me directly or I would be very happy to elaborate on certain topics. Like I know I just said about the Wi-Fi thing and then we didn't discuss it, but I'm very happy to jump on another episode if you want to go further in depth on something. I know you had loads of questions for me today and it was all like quite loads of stuff. So, we can always do that, or you can come and find me on Instagram at Grace Kingswell. My podcast that is health, functional medicine, lifestyle based is called State of Mind. And there are, I think, 9 or 10 series to listen back to. And if you are into things like social commentary and pop culture and you really miss the podcast called The High Low, then come and listen to Two's Company podcast with myself and my friend Sophie. And I think that's probably it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what a great guest. I feel like I learned so much myself, and I'm not even pregnant, that I'm going to take into my daily life. So hopefully if you're, trying for a baby, if you're going through IVF or if you're pregnant, hopefully that was some use for you. If you do find it useful, let us know what particular things you decide to adapt yourself. But yeah, overall, massive thank you to Grace. As she said, if you do have any questions on the back of it, you can really reach out to her. Like, she's really open to that. So please get in touch. I'm Alex Hyam. I've been your host of the Morning Rituals podcast, brought to you by Exhale. Please hit subscribe. you know, that'll really help us keep the podcast growing.